Okay, hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith. I'm a black belt candidate at Ishinru Karate and Japanese Jiu Jitsu, along with Okinawan, or rather combat judo and Aikido. I have those are my primary experience, but I also have a year and a half training in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. And here's why I can't stand Gracie Jiu Jitsu. First of all, Gracie Jiu Jitsu does not teach a single thing that I didn't already know from Japanese Jiu Jitsu. Matter of fact, I just found out, as I made in that other video, I just found out that officially there are only 77 submissions on the Gracie Jiu Jitsu syllabus. Well, I already know over 200 unique Japanese submissions, so they're not teaching you something in Gracie Jiu Jitsu that I know. All right. But I can't stand watching Gracie Jiu Jitsu matches for the most part, either pure Jiu Jitsu matches or even in MMA when it turns into a Jiu Jitsu match, because they don't know what they're doing. A lot of times you will see, even in MMA, but especially in pure jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu matches, the one person will try to pull guard and just give up on the standing position and just lay down intentionally on their back and try to invite the other person into dry humping them in their guard. All right, because that's what I call it. It's dry humping. It's not fighting. But anyway, he will try to get to entice the other person to come into his guard and just lay down and pull guard and try to go ahead and get the guard position on the other person, because the person on the ground in the guard situation is actually in a superior position, because the person trying to attack them is trying to break the leg strength of both of his legs to get past him. And when I was a member of the Gracie Dojo right down the street, it's Gracie United, which is owned by Raphael Elwanger. He owns 20-something locations. And I think he's either the first or second cousin of Hoist Gracie, or also he's the first cousin of one of Gracie's cousins, something like that. Anyway, he's permitted by the Gracie family to use the name Gracie United, and he studies directly under one of Hoist Gracie's immediate relatives. And he's a fifth degree black belt in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. But when I studied there, they didn't know stand up whatsoever. No striking class, no standing submissions, nothing. They always started from the kneeling position about 2 feet away from one another. And one day they came in and they were doing guard exercises where here I was already a black belt candidate in Nishinru Karate, and I'm wearing a white belt to class because I just joined a new school. But a certain blue belt gold medal winner and a green belt and some others decided that they were going to have pulling guard classes. And I'm like, the only reason you're beating me is because you're requiring me to enter your guard. And if this was a real fight or a cage match, either way, I would not enter the guard of a grappler that I already know is about as good as myself, because you're stupid to enter their guard. I'm either going to directly pass their guard from the standing position and not enter their guard like a complete idiot, or I'm going to stand back and make the referee stand them up, and then I'm going to kick their ass from the standing position. I'm not going to enter the guard of a Gracie fighter that does Gracie Jiu Jitsu every day of their life. That would be stupid, even though I know all the same techniques they know. All right? But I was like, the only reason you can beat me at this exercise is because you're already in a superior position and you're requiring that I intentionally enter an inferior position and then somehow expect me to beat you. And plus, punches and kicks weren't allowed in the exercise, nor were the joint locks and other submissions that I already know. Because allegedly you're not allowed to use joint locks in the in their gym until you're at least blue belt. So they were handicapping me, since I was actually an expert at Japanese jiu-jitsu. The deal was they were just pranking me, I think, because I was an expert at Japanese jiu-jitsu, so they banned all Japanese jiu-jitsu moves. That's why one of the reasons why I quit. And I got half a mind to call him up and tell him that the reason I quit his gym is because both he and his students are complete jerks and assholes to people. They really are. But anyway, jiu-jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, you know what I'm talking about if you've watched Gracie Jiu-Jitsu competitions. One guy decides to pull guard and just lays on his back and gives up the standing position. And pretty much spreads his legs like a whore, like he's trying to get screwed, and wants the other guy to go for it and enter into his guard. And they call that pulling guard. And that's the issue in Gracie Jiu Jitsu now, is that he doesn't know a single standing submission and doesn't know a single standing takedown, so he just takes himself to the ground and invites the opponent to attack him in his guard. So that's why striking should be allowed in jiu-jitsu class. And striking should be taught in jiu-jitsu. And striking should be allowed in jiu-jitsu competitions, because then I'd just kick his leg over and over until it either broke his leg or until he stood up and tried to fight for real. Because that's not fighting. All right. And then pulling guard is not going to save your life in a street self-defense situation. 9 times out of 10 in a street self-defense situation, the attacker is drunk or high, and they're also bigger than you. All right. And you pulling guard and lying on the ground while a 260 plus pounder to possibly 300 to 320 pound football player who's out of line and possibly on drugs decides they want to pound your face in, pulling guard is not going to save your life. What's going to save your life against a bigger, stronger person, especially if they're on drugs like PCP or LSD or cocaine, what's going to save your life is Okinawan striking. To be honest with you, you're going to need to throat jab them, or you're going to need to eye gouge them, either with a 5-finger eye gouge or 2 thumbs in the eye sockets and rip the eyeballs out, or you're going to need to kick them in the side of the knee about as hard as humanly possible, especially if they really are on cocaine or PCP or something like that. All right. So, or even if they're drunk on alcohol, you're going to need to kick a bigger person, a much bigger person like Brock Lesnar's size to freaking what's his name? Braun Strowman's size. If they're like that size, 265 to 300 something pounds, you're going to need to kick them in the knee or throat jab them as hard as you can, and you're not going to win a wrestling match of any kind with a 300 pounder, even if you think you're a black belt at jiu-jitsu. Trust me, you can't do it. I was I want to say 21 years old, right after I had to quit karate class for personal reasons and family reasons. And my cousin, who's now deceased, Delvin Glasgow, he's a natural 300 pounder on foot, about 6'3", and just built like a tank. And he wasn't even he wasn't like 0% body fat or something like that. I'm not making that claim, but he was built like a freaking tank, and he was an offensive lineman in football, and he knew martial arts too. On top of that. And one day, just to prove to me that certain of our self-defense theories, even in karate class, did not work against a big enough attacker, he grabbed me from behind in a bear hug, and he's like, "Now what are you going to do?" And I was like, I started to try to do the things that I had been taught against a theory of a normal-sized attacker, and a bear hug from behind by a 300-pound man does not get broken by you elbowing them in the liver or raking their knuckles or trying to put a wrist lock on them. A bear hug from behind by a 300-pound man flat out defeats you no matter who you are. So you better understand that. And just to mock me, because it was an unfair challenge, because he caught me off guard while I was having a unrelated conversation with my older brother. He caught me off guard from behind, and just to prove to me that it doesn't work. He's like, "Now what are you going to do?" He's like, "Now I can bite you on your shoulder." And he literally bit me on my shoulder just to prove that he could. Well, he's now deceased. But the point he was making is that some stuff they teach you in martial arts classes does not work in the real world, even though they think it works, especially against a much bigger opponent. If you don't see them coming, you are flat out freaking screwed, no matter what you think you know. Especially if they catch you off guard and they're also bigger than you. But like in the Bruce Lee the Dragon story, where Bruce Lee beat 3 or 4 average to slightly bigger than average men in the gym fight, and he's supposedly, 135 pounder? That never happened, first of all. That is pure fantasy in Bruce Lee and his family's mind. That fight and the other fight in that movie never happened. There is no evidence that that fight ever happened. And a 135-pound man, it could be Gabriel Varga, the 6-time world champion, is 135 pounds. And I told him one time, I said, I'm a natural 185 pounder. I said, and I know everything you know and a bunch of stuff you don't know. I said, I could literally challenge you and Jonathan Haggerty both to a fight, especially if I was in the prime of my life again, and you would not be able to beat me even in a handicap because you're too small to beat me. And so this idea that Bruce Lee somehow beat 485 to 200 pounders in a fight, and they portrayed the American guys as complete fools because they had them like lunging and diving and jumping and doing stupid shit that had nothing to do with a real fight science or a real fight that even an average American would already know at that time. And so I'm like, this fight never happened because nobody's dumb enough to try to hit him like that. Nobody's dumb enough to dive at their opponent and totally miss and fly 10 feet out of the way and this other stupidity like they portrayed in the Dragon the Bruce Lee movie. And I'm getting on this to make the point that there are martial arts fairy tales and fantasies, and Gracie Jiu Jitsu is one of them. It does not work in a street self-defense situation. Especially against a bigger opponent. They advertise that it's a better fight style against a bigger opponent, that it doesn't rely on strength. Do you know that Royce Gracie used performance-enhancing drugs, namely steroids, the second time he prepared to fight for Sakuraba? When they drug tested him, he was on a very high dose of steroids. If Gracie Jiu Jitsu didn't rely on strength, why was he doping to try to beat the guy? So they're liars. They market that to you as it's able to make a wimp into a champion and beat a bigger opponent, and it absolutely does not. It's no different than collegiate wrestling. 9 times out of 10, the physically stronger fighter is going to win at Gracie Jiu Jitsu, especially once you get on the ground. Because if you can't bench press another 185 pounder off of you, you're pretty much screwed once they get on top of you. And same thing with a 300 pounder. If you can't bench press 300 pounds, you're not going to get a 300 pounder off of you. Period. So don't deceive yourself whether you're a Gracie Jiu Jitsu pulling guard nonsense. Why would you want to fight like that anyway? I don't know. I was there for a year and a half and they never impressed me. I beat them more often than not anyway, based on what I already knew from karate class. But anyway, whether you think you know something from karate or whether you think you know something from Gracie Jiu Jitsu or judo or aikido or whatever, don't fool yourself into thinking that you can beat a much bigger opponent, certainly if they're on drugs. You are absolutely going to get curb stomped if you try to fight that person with anything other than the most brutal and violent techniques, namely throat jabs, eye gouges, and knee breaks. That's the only thing that's going to work against a big guy, especially if he's on drugs. You're not going to beat him with regular grappling, and you're not going to beat him with regular striking to the jaw or something like that. He's not even going to feel your jab if he's on drugs. He's not even going to feel your jab. It won't even affect him. What will affect him is if you break his arm or his knee or crush his throat or rip his eyeballs out with your thumbs.